My name is Bill Scholder, and I live at 32 Valley Road, and I moved into my house in 1980.
Spell your last name.
Scholder, and I will not repeat anything that I said when I was under oath.
That's greatly appreciated.
Okay. You're going to hear some very interesting things, though.
I'm sorry?
You will hear some very interesting things, though. In 1985, the township was observing Souther's operations. For example, they saw high piles of railroad ties that could be observed from Valley Road. The township tried to create a solution to allow the Southers to continue their non-conforming use while at the same time looking out for the welfare of the homeowners. Okay. The result was the 1985 resolution. And I would like to refer to a table that I created with statements copied directly from the 1985 resolution. And I will also point out some statements made by Zimmerman in regard to that 1985 resolution. And you have a copy of this table. If you look at what was handed, you can see where that table is.
Is that table number 1 you referred to it, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe it's table. Related to quotes from the 1985 resolution. Okay. Now, okay, I'm basically going to walk through some of those things, and I'm going to bring some other information, So, okay, the first statement from the 1985 resolution says that no railroad tie pile shall exceed 12 feet in height. Okay, and Mr. Zimmerman, in his rebuttal report, he says there was a restriction on the height of railroad ties, but no restriction in the resolution on the height of autos, buses, or other scrap metal. So he takes it because they said a restriction of 12 feet only for railroad ties, that every other salvage material, scrap, could be any height whatsoever. Okay, now I'm going to be spending a lot of time referring to a document which I recently opened from the township a couple of days ago. And
Has that been provided to the board?
You have it. You have a copy in the package.
Okay, just give us the number so we can
Well,
reference
it
What do you have it
basically is a
identified?
minor subdivision plat from January 8th, 1985.
You don't have a copy of this with you in front of you?
I have. What we did, it was a big drawing, and the important information was basically copied. You have a copy of this.
Okay, you
in
said
front of
minor subdivision plat dated
Minor subdivision
1/8/85?
plat, January 8th, 1985.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, not to interrupt Mr. Scholder, but that document has been marked as an evidentiary exhibit. I believe it's RW1 or RW2.
Okay. All right, counsel, that would have been during Mr. Saminsky's,
Yes, I believe I actually have a copy. I'm trying to find it myself with me.
all right, you want, Mr. Scholder, you want to give counsel a minute, he wants to try to find his copy.
I can show you what it looks like. Let's see. 1985.
It's also part of, counsel, it's part of this folder that Mr. Scholder provided to you and
Now-
the board.
If you look at this drawing.
Do you have it?
No, I never got a copy of that folder, is what I meant before. I understand a lot of those exhibits might have been previously submitted and identified as exhibits, but I never received a copy of that folder that was identified.
Okay, you have a copy of it?
Thank you
Of
very
the
much.
plat now? Okay, go ahead.
So if we look at this drawing, what it shows is what this site was approved for in 1985. And what it shows is railroad ties stockpiles to be relocated. To the right of the old driveway, another one, railroad stockpiles to be relocated to the left of the driveway. Further down, it says railroad ties, and then it shows a big area, relocated railroad ties. And if you look at this drawing, you also see it says abandoned autos, small section, and then boulders, brush, and trees. And then it says small amounts of scrap metal. Small amounts of scrap metal. Now, if in 1985, when Zimmerman says we don't know what the truck traffic was in 1985, and I'll get into that more later, okay? Obviously, if we have reports from the traffic expert that counted truck that showed there were sometimes in excess of 50 trucks a day. And if you did have that volume of trucks then in 1985, you wouldn't have had small amounts of scrap metal. Okay. So that was a small part of the business. So now I'm gonna just go back to what Zimmerman said, that there was a restriction on the height of railroad ties, but no restriction in the resolution on the height of autos, buses, or other scrap metal. Carol pointed this out when she spoke, that if you did have those piles in 1985, then the township definitely would have put a restriction on those as well. Okay, the next statement is that the subdivision and relocation of railroad ties will create a more residential environment along Valley Road. And Carol already pointed this out. What Zimmerman said was, the spirit and the intent of the condition was to remove a highly visible salvage material from Valley Road. So the township did everything that it could to make this neighborhood residential friendly. It's pointed out many, many places. The next thing is the non-conforming use is being reduced in area. That was part of the 1985 resolution, and I assume that the reason they said that is because part of this subdivision, they took 1 acre of residential land, and they took that away from the 8.5 acres, and that reduced the size of the salvage business, and also because the first 240 feet was off of Valley Road, it took the business away from Valley Road. So that was a real good intention of making it residential friendly, and that was one of the reasons that they approved the 1985 resolution. So now, so the non-conforming use is being reduced in area. Okay. Now it says a subsequent site visit in 2012 by David Novak shows that clear space is presently being used for the storage of material. The utilization of this clear space represents an expansion of non-conforming use. So David Novak cited them on removing trees that they shouldn't have removed and then using that space to store material. And they were cited as an expansion of non-conforming use. Now, what David Zimmerman says is, the 1985 resolution found that granting the minor subdivision to create a new residential lot and relocate of the railroad ties will create a more residential environment, especially recognizing the new residential lot removed 1 acre of salvage property 240 feet deep from Valley Road. The use and operation today maintains the 1985 objective. Okay, so now I would like you to take a look at pictures.
Mr. Scholder, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think you're taking some of the wind out of Mr.
That's
Gibbs'
okay, that's
summation
fine,
of closing
that's fine,
arguments,
that's
because
fine.
you sound like a
That's
lawyer
right.
giving a summation of closing argument.
Okay. Okay, so look at picture number 1 and look at picture number 10, okay? The intent was to make it residential friendly, take away 1 acre of property off of Valley Road, okay? Look at picture number 1, okay? You can also look at picture number 2, which comes from the 2012 Nature Site Plan. And what that picture shows, if you look at picture number 2, it shows the 2-story dwelling, the 2-story garage and the dwelling. And if you look at the 25-foot setback lines, you'll see that they're just about touching the 25-foot setback line. And the only reason that
Apparently some, if not all the board members don't have what you're just referring to.
this was presented a month ago. Pictures 1, 2, 3, 4, so
So
on
that you
and so
presented
forth.
at the last
The
hearing.
last time.
Okay.
It's not in what I gave you today, but
Okay.
it was presented.
You gotta help us along when you're
Okay.
referring to certain
Okay.
items that,
You know, Erin basically took care of it. I saw her in the township building when I got the Oprah. She said it was all passed
you
out.
have to help the board
Okay.
members out
Can
by
you find
saying
it?
that these were pictures presented last time, because
Last
they're
time.
looking in your folder.
Okay, right, I would have added them, but I gave them to you. so
No,
I don't
that's
have
all right,
them.
no, it's no
Okay.
problem, but just
So-
help us out when they're not
Okay,
in
so
your folder,
basically,
say they were presented last time.
What picture 1 shows, and I hope you can find it. Can you find picture 1?
I have a picture,
Okay, you have picture 1?
this one here.
Okay, I believe that's the one. So what picture 1 shows is residential property, lot 141.01 and lot 142. Okay, again, the intent of the 1985 resolution was to make it residential friendly. Look at what's going on in this picture. All kinds of machines and so on and so forth. Okay, and if you look at picture 10, you can get another view from Valley Road, where we're trying to make Valley Road residential friendly. Can you find picture 10? That was in the present package. Okay, what you see is one,
Was not in today's package.
in today's package, picture 10, in today's package.
Why don't you hold up picture 10 so it'll make it easier for the board? to find a picture and look at it
This
as you're
is the
talking
view,
about it.
this is the view from Valley Road, previously submitted by Frank Mileto. So you're looking from Valley Road, and what you're seeing is a whole lineup of giant backhoes, tractor trailers, every kind of equipment that you can imagine. Okay, that's the lineup from Valley Road. The township in 1985 says, let's make it residential friendly. So what do you have? You're making use of this residential property with all this equipment, and then this other drawing also shows what's happening on residential property, 25-foot setbacks ignored, and so on and so forth. Now I believe I might be coming back to the minor subdivision plan. So we just covered that the non-conforming use is being reduced in area, where David Zimmerman says, especially recognizing the new residential lot limit of 1 acre, 240 feet. Okay, the use and operation today maintain the 1985 objective. The applicant testified, number 4, the applicant testified that the railroad tie piles will be relocated and landscaping done so that there will be a visual improvement to the area. David Zimmerman in 2012 said that a proposed and approved landscaping buffer between subject site and lot 141.01 and the subject site, okay, that it was approved and it was proposed and approved. And then Zimmerman says in 2012, when he went back there, the site visit revealed that this has not been addressed. And Zimmerman says the objective presented to the board a 1985 site plan exhibit that superimposed proposed landscaping upon a minor subdivision plat. Okay, so he's recognizing in 1985 they had it. So now if you look at, again, going back to the minor subdivision plat dated January 8th, if you look at it, you can see that there's proposed landscaping. That proposed landscaping covers the back of lot 141.01 and also all the way along the driveway. And if you also follow this picture, you see that what they called lot 123 back then, it shows all kinds of trees on the back of that property that meets up with the proposed landscaping buffer. So if you're looking from Valley Road, it would be residential friendly, as you can't see the site. Okay. Now, if we look at the 2012 major site plan that was recently submitted, that's picture number 2 in what I gave you, what I presented last time. Okay. And with it, if you look at the 2012 plan and you compare it to the 1985 version, the 1985 version, if you look at it, it shows all kinds of trees that meet up with this proposed landscaping buffer. Okay, again, blocks the view from Valley Road. Mr. Zimmerman in the 2012 plan left out those trees, although he says that the 2012 plan was derived directly from the 1985 version, which it was to some degree, except he left certain things out. So again, the aim was to have this visual improvement for the neighborhoods, especially along Valley Road, and also in the neighbors' backyards. The applicant will obtain whatever permits are required. Obviously, the 1985 resolution stated, they said it was in regard to relocating railroad ties, but they said the applicant will obtain whatever permits are required, okay? And David Novak, if we look at his report, he cited many illegal expansions. So when David Zimmerman says there is no unauthorized, invalid expansion of the salvage operation business over what was allowed in 1985. Can't quite understand that. No unauthorized, invalid expansion of the salvage operation business over what was allowed in 1985. Yet Zimmerman testified illegal expansions in many, many areas. So that statement doesn't make much sense to me. Okay. The applicant testified that his salvage operation is substantially similar to the use of the premise since 1949 to 1950, and therefore is a continuation of non-conforming use. And I would agree that in 1985 it was a continuation of non-conforming use because they did substantially similar things. Now, Zimmerman says the board approved the continuation of valid pre-existing non-conforming use of the property as a salvage operation as operated in the past in 1985 and proposed to be operated in the future. So his word proposed to be operated in the future isn't correct because it was substantially similar and there was no expansion in 1985. But if we look at pictures that you had last week, well, if you look at picture 1 and you look at picture number 3, and if you look at picture number 8, okay, let's take a look at picture number 8. Picture number 8 is a small section of the yard. Picture number 3 shows the entire yard, and it shows an entire yard with over 60 transit trains sitting on the property. And I know that because I counted them. So if we look at picture number 8, what you see in one small location is 3 giant backhoes, one with this magnetic thing to load this truck with material, 3 giant backhoes, and then 2 bulldozers, so 5 pieces of equipment in one small area. And I'll get into, what I try to understand way back when I want to understand what is the definition that the township provided for expansion of non-conforming use.
Let me just interrupt you 1 second. Obviously, your comments, for the most part, have to do with your conclusion, opinions, and whatever of Mr. Zimmerman's testimony. Keep in mind that Mr.
I know, we're
Zimmerman,
gonna rebuttal
yeah,
next
Mr.
session.
Zimmerman is still to be cross-examined
I understand that.
by Mr. Kins.
I'm just.
Well, let me just finish. So I want you to know that I don't think it would be very proper for you to get a second bite at the apple after Mr. Kins cross-examines Mr. Zimmerman at the next hearing in January, and maybe Mr. Szymanski does redirect for you to come back up here and comment further on Mr. Zimmerman's
I'm trying to take
testimony.
care of it
Let me
right
finish.
now.
Based on cross-examination and perhaps redirect. You understand?
I understand that.
Okay, just wanted
I'm
to
almost
be clear
done. I'm almost
that there's
done with
still attorneys to question.
I get it.
Okay, thank you.
And the last thing, statement number 7, is the proposed subdivision and salvage operation is not discordant nor disharmonious with the location of other structures located on Valley Road. And Mr. Zimmerman, and I presented to the board just 1 page from, I gave you his entire rebuttal package, which was 8 pages, but I also took out 1 page, which I combined 2 pages into 1, which is in harmony with the neighborhood, okay? And the conclusion at the end of that page says that, in my opinion, the present application before the board remains true to the 1985 conclusion of the board that the use is not discordant nor disharmonious with the neighborhood. That's his conclusion. Now, if you look at that piece of paper that he presented, what he basically says is, I agree with the 1985 resolution that says we're in harmony with the neighborhood. And then he says, and we should note the following. He says nobody knows what the sound levels were in 1985. Nobody knows what the traffic levels were in 1985. Homes on occasion in Stone Ridge, on occasion, could hear sounds from these neighborhoods. Okay, that's basically what he said, and based on that, he somehow reaches the conclusion that because we didn't know what the sound or truck traffic was in 1985, that it must be in harmony with the neighborhood if it was in 1985. Can't understand that conclusion. Okay, so that's the end of the 1985 resolution. And basically what I'm trying to say is that if you look at every reason that the 1985 resolution was granted, none of those reasons are valid today. Now I have one more piece that I'd like to cover, and I have been trying to understand what the meaning of non-conforming use is, okay? What does the township consider to be an expansion of non-conforming use? So I went to the township building and I got document number,
Well, let me address you for a moment, interrupt you.
yeah,
A non-conforming use is regulated by the statute, okay, and case law, all right? So, I mean, and this is something that the board is
I
gonna have to
understand that.
determine.
I understand
So
that.
this,
I
this
was
is a
told-
legal principle.
I understand that.
Okay.
And when I went to the township business, they said, you cannot talk to Mr. Novak Okay, we gave you a copy of that document, and I don't remember exactly what the document number was. Yeah, I think I do. And I shouldn't take too much longer, okay, hopefully. It was document 54-30.4. And I felt that if Mr. Zimmerman was able to go out and do his job and basically say that you violated this non-conforming use, that he would have to know what the definition meant. So I went in there trying to understand what it meant, and I was told that the board is gonna be deciding that, and therefore he can't answer that question. But I still got a copy of the document, and the document basically says definition 1, any non-conforming use or structure which is non-conforming because of use shall not be enlarged, extended, or structurally altered in any manner whatsoever.
And I assume you're quoting from the township
Right
ordinance?
directly, and it was right directly from the township.
So the record is clear what you're quoting from?
Right, okay. Shall not be enlarged in any manner whatsoever. And the definition seems quite clear. Frank Mileto also basically had said that, and then I got a copy of it, and he said the same thing. Yes, it seems quite clear. Shall not be enlarged in any manner whatsoever.
That's the zoning ordinance that the board all has,
Okay.
just so you know.
Okay, I'm just reading one sentence from it, okay, because that's all you can really find. And, you know, it says, shall not be enlarged in any manner whatsoever. And then when you look at what existed in 1985, where if you go back to the major minor site plan, minor subdivision plat, it basically shows a crane, trucks, and a crane. And Mr. Zimmerman also said that the business needed trucks and a dozer singular, okay? And now, if you look at these pictures, okay, you can see the number of these giant backhoes. You know, we could go and count them, but the number is large, and it's much, much larger than what existed what existed in 1985. And now I'm gonna just go on to the second definition, and the second definition says, no non-conforming structure may be structurally altered if the alteration would increase the degree or extent of the non-conforming condition, or would create any condition on the property that would not be in conformance with the chapter. David Zimmerman stated that he was seeking the approval of concrete footings and a new ramp to accommodate the replacement scale, okay? So you never really had a scale that could measure trucks, let alone a 60-foot tractor trailer, okay? But he's asking for approval of this weigh station. And I would just like to conclude by reading from a table which shows how the weigh station has increased the degree or extent of the non-conforming condition, and then I'll be done. Okay. How the weigh station increased the degree or extent of the non-conforming condition. It allows and encourages scrap collectors to bring material to the site for sale to the suds, and Frank Mileto stated that. This brought about the sudden surge in truck traffic. Before the installation of the weigh station in 2007, truck traffic was minimal, as many neighbors have already testified. Today, there are as many as 50 or more trucks are observed entering the site. For more information, read the previously submitted traffic report by Joe Steiger. These trucks are responsible for the massive amount of material brought to the site, which then has to be processed. To process this amount of material, new equipment had to be purchased. New equipment cannot be purchased to expand a non-conforming use business. This was stated by Frank Mileto. This new equipment has caused much of the noise that the neighbors started. The new equipment basically is giant backhoes with these grapples. And these grapples pick giant piles of scrap, and then they crush them, or they dump them into trucks or bins, or they just create piles and piles with these giant grapples attached to these backhoes. So now with the new equipment has caused much of the noise that the neighbors started hearing after 2007. Now with the intensity of the business increasing, more land is needed to process and store the huge amount of scrap. Therefore, the need to illegally cut down trees and illegally store scrap on this land. You have already learned this from David Novak's memorandum, that they illegally removed trees and stored this material in places that they didn't belong, okay? Now, because there's still not enough land, the piles illegally get higher and higher. My conclusion is the intent shown in the 1985 minor subdivision plat is not substantially similar to the present operation shown in picture 3, a variance should not be granted for the illegally installed waste station